We were chasing jobs and money and stability. We were doing all the things they told us to do. And now we are at this point in our lives where we're thinking really hard about what do we want the next 20 or 30 years to look like. So here are my priorities in life right now. Maintain my health, stay calm, have peace. That's it. Those are my three big priorities. And boy, have my priorities changed over the course of my life. So for anyone over the age of 50, we grew up in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. We've had a lot of stuff go on in our lives. We've seen a lot of interesting history, and we did all the things you're supposed to do for the most part that our parents or people in authority taught us to do. And so our priorities were kind of folded into their priorities. For example, get a job or go to school and buy a house and have a car and have children and do all the things. But our personal priorities, especially when we were younger, were about how do I look? And now it's all about how do I feel? Another priority that you may have had, and I know I probably had, was I want it all. And now it's I want peace. We used to live by the rules of work hard and play hard. And now we are all about work smart and live well. So for most of us during the time when we grew up and MTV was such a huge influence in our lives, everything was about pop culture. It was all about the bright colors and neon and all of the interesting music and all of the interesting looks that we could adopt for our own personal style. Some people wanted to look just like Madonna. Some people wanted to look like Boy George. Some people wanted to look like Bruce Springsteen. But regardless who influenced you and who you wanted to look like, we were definitely consumed with how do we look. We were very image conscious, and that was the message that was being sent to us, is that we should be image conscious. We were very brand aware, and we were very trend conscious as well. For me personally, I never had all of the cool stuff that made you look quintessential 80s. I think I saw a meme once that showed what people thought 80s teenagers looked like, which was like all neon and really crazy outfits, to what we actually looked like, which for girls was like Lee pinstripe jeans and sweaters with puff sleeves. So yeah, I didn't have that super edgy 80s look by any means, but I definitely was consumed with how I look, as evidenced by the hours and hours of time it took me to get ready to go to school or go to an event, the countless number of curling irons I went through in life because I wore them out, the many, many cans of hairspray I used up and polluted the air. And right now, I think a lot of our priorities have shifted from being cool to being real. I think unlike our parents' generation or even our grandparents, they definitely had a keeping up appearances kind of mentality. And it was everything from, the kind of car they had parked in their driveway to, how they looked and how they presented to the world. I think our generation is slowly kind of adopting a different approach to that. Many of us are okay with aging, where my parents always talked about being afraid of aging and dreading it. I think for many of us, we've actually embraced it, even though a lot of people in our generation talk about how young we feel on the inside, but on the outside, we're aging. But yeah, many of us are choosing gray hair and slower lives. I think another interesting priority, or something that we're deprioritizing, is technology. So of course, we were brought up in that technology age, and we definitely straddled the fence of living in the manual world to the digital world. We went from rotary phones to smartphones, and we went from libraries to Google. But I think for many of us, we want to stay connected, but we don't want to let technology and social media rule our lives. And I think we see tech as a tool and not an identity. And I think for those of us over a certain age that are trying to use technology as their identity, I would suspect that they are probably a little stressed out because it is a hard image to keep up. You know, your Facebook persona versus your real life persona. You know, everyone on Facebook looks perfect, smiles all the time, has the most beautiful family, and never has any problems. But I think people are craving hearing and seeing people's real stories. Another priority we have now is avoiding burnout. So we were in a generation where our parents were overworked. You know, it was kind of the start of the two-parent work family. And of course, in addition to work burnout, divorces started happening more, or the parents decided to stay in their unhappy marriages. So mental health wasn't really as mainstream as it is today. And I think a lot of us are definitely embracing, acknowledging any mental health issues that some of us have. You know, therapy is more normalized, boundaries are healthier. We're definitely aware of creating boundaries and having boundaries, where I think our parents' generation, that wasn't even a concept to them. And our parents actually equated success to stress. I know for me, this is definitely not the case. In fact, I think the opposite of that. I feel that the less stress you have or create, the more successful you actually are in life. So back when we were younger, we were chasing so many things. We were chasing jobs and money and stability. We were doing all the things they told us to do. And now we are at this point in our lives where we're thinking really hard about what do we want the next 20 or 30 years to look like. I remember when I was a young adult, my dad always took the local newspaper and he would always read the obituaries to see if he knew anybody. And of course, he always did. And he always used to say to me, yeah, I probably only have 25 or 30 years left. And I thought he was absolutely crazy and morbid. And I didn't understand why he would say such things. Now I catch myself doing a very similar thing. And I definitely look at the ages of people passing away, and it averages anywhere from 75 to 81, 82 years old. And yeah, sure, there are always people that pass away very young, or there are people that live to be 98 years old. But I think for the most part, many of us are now realizing that we probably only have 25, 30 years left of our lives if we fall into that average. And we're really thinking about how do we want to spend that time? What are the things that we want to fill our minds with, that we want to experience in life? Another thing that we are now prioritizing is simplicity over accumulation. We've gone through a lot of interesting and scary financial times during our lifetime, from recessions to financial crises to layoffs and broken promises regarding pensions and job security. And I think we're just so used to trying to walk on quicksand when it comes to the financial stability of our future. So yeah, we definitely want to have security as we continue to age and are looking to retire. But I think for many of us, we are also shifting to simplicity. We're getting rid of lots of stuff that are accumulating in our basements, in our garages. We don't want to leave it for our family members or children to have to deal with. I know this is something that my parents did not think about, or their parents. I remember after my grandparents died, my mom spent a good solid week going through their home, sorting through all of their stuff that had accumulated for about 50 years. And she had to separate everything in piles of donation, throwaway, and then auction, I believe. And it was such a time-consuming, grueling job. And for many of us, I know, because we have seen our parents go through that with their parents, we don't want to do that to generations below us. Not to mention having all of that stuff that we don't use or need is kind of claustrophobic. You feel a little closed in. Now, I'm not saying that I am a minimalist by any means, but over the years, I have definitely hauled crap loads of stuff over to the thrift store. And as a matter of fact, I actually have a whole bunch of stuff that I want to get rid of now that's in my basement, and I've been saving the boxes. And so in the next couple weeks, I'm planning on boxing up all of the stuff that I don't use and don't need and donating it. And of course, by eliminating all of the stuff that you don't need anymore, it definitely makes you feel a little lighter, both in your surroundings and also emotionally. So, of course, a big priority for many of us is to live with intention. And that encompasses everything I've kind of briefly reviewed. So I'm curious, how have your priorities changed as you've gotten older? What things used to be really important to you that are now not important at all? And what new priorities have you put in place to replace those priorities? Are you one of those people that is definitely prioritizing your mental health and peace of mind? Are we finally at the stage of our lives where we are actually seeing what's really important in life? As always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Noelle, and I will talk to you in the next video.